Last week's events were another major blow for global supply chains, and now industry experts are warning businesses and consumers about more delivery delays, more shortages, and even more acute price hikes are coming. A series of disasters, including devastating floods in China and Europe, could result in empty grocery shelves, out-of-stock products, and prolonged shipping delays, exacerbating the already strained global supply chains. Western Europe and China's Henan province, key transportation centers and home to several major businesses, are struggling to resume operations as the disasters have severely damaged railways used for the delivery of goods and raw materials in both regions. Companies in the supply chain industry reported that water rushed into industrial areas, extensively damaging facilities. In an interview with CNBC, Pawan Joshi, the executive vice president of supply chain software firm E2Open, said that Black Friday and the holiday season, for which products and raw materials are being staged, will face the brunt of the impact. He added that consumer electronics, dorm room furniture, clothing, and appliances will all continue to be in short supply as back-to-school shopping starts up and will trickle into the peak holiday shopping season. Delays from the distribution of raw materials necessary to produce goods will have a ripple effect and disrupt supply chains for weeks and months, Joshi highlighted. Come Black Friday, we can likely expect to see prices rise for all sorts of goods, such as consumer electronics, furniture, apparel, and appliances, he told CNBC. Amongst the hardest hit industries by these brutal floods is auto. Many of the biggest automakers in the globe, along with their suppliers, are based in regions that were critically affected by the disaster. Now that automakers were finally being able to start ramping up production, the disruption will likely hammer car manufacturing once again, with shipping delays expected to stall operations at several plants for months. The flooding has the potential to throw another wrench into the mix for the auto industry, which is already reeling from a semiconductor shortage, Joshi said. The global shipping crisis is worsening at a quite alarming pace. Even Apple CEO Tim Cook stressed that freight costs are way too high. In a year, freight rates skyrocketed by nearly 500%, and they continue to reach unprecedented levels with each passing month. If billionaires are complaining about the staggering surge, for small business owners, it's become simply impossible to find affordable vessel space to send their products overseas. With freight prices spiraling out of control, the U.S. has issued a presidential order authorizing the Federal Maritime Commission and Surface Transportation Board to investigate the practices of steamship lines regarding consolidation and pricing. According to the Vice President of Supply Chain Management of Raymond Logistics, the measure was a shot across the bow for shipping lines. It definitely puts them on notice that they're being watched and they're going to be under scrutiny, he said. The main factor pushing shipping prices to sky highs is the container crisis that started in September last year. Almost 1 year later, the situation has only got worse, and the main problem behind the critical shortage of containers is the extraordinary surge in demand for consumer goods coming from China. Chinese companies are so eager to refill containers that shipping lines are sending them back to Asian ports rather than waiting for them to be restocked with United States products, such as crops. Meanwhile, shippers are taking 4 to 5 times longer than usual to transport containers filled with Chinese products, so companies are offering a sizable financial incentive to get them back there as soon as possible. Stephen Parklington, the president of CFT Corporation, an international logistics company, estimates that 60% of 20-foot containers and 80% of 40-foot containers are heading back to Asia completely empty. That is aggravating the container shortage and resulting in soaring transportation costs. Shipping industry experts are estimating that only half of the normal container supply will be available for U.S. businesses to send their products in the September to October period when new crops are supposed to be moving to overseas markets. But several farmers and ranchers are already aware that they will remain unable to send their products across the ocean, and some of them are being forced to make some extremely painful choices. One California farmer said, "We've already begun the process of laying off half of our staff." He said this, noting that shipping lines are canceling traditional container routes to focus on getting empty containers back to China. "It seems almost weekly we're losing shipping routes right now," he said. But the shipping crisis is about to get worse as major shipping companies such as Hapag-Lloyd are withdrawing their North American service, and they are drastically reducing service amid port logjams across the West Coast. On top of that, there's also an ongoing trend in which bulk shipping is given priority. Those fortunate enough to get their outgoing product into a container are getting rolled over to the next vessel because priority is being given to empty containers, one industry executive revealed. Now that can cause a 60 to 80-day delay waiting for the next ship. Detention and delay costs are eating up businesses' profit associated with shipment. The container shortage issue is particularly concerning for the U.S. agricultural industry, which is comprised of many small farmers that supply niche products to buyers who don't want to buy bulk commodities. For instance, 40% of California's nuts and 35% of oat crops travel by container to markets around the world, but now that number is expected to sharply drop due to the lack of available containers. According to Jordan Atkins, the vice president of WTC Group, a transloading company, there is no end in sight to the container crisis. He said, "We're seeing the demand that is causing these imbalances continue for at least the next 6 to 8 months. Already, shipping delays are having serious impacts across several U.S. industries as companies try to recover amid the reopening. For the U.S. airline industry, shipping delays are being translated into fuel shortages in many of the country's airports. American Airlines station jet fuel delivery delays initially affected mostly western U.S. cities, but are now being reported at American stations across the country. Delivery delays are expected to continue through mid-August. John Dudley, managing director of flight operations, recently wrote in a memo to the company's pilots, "As our country continues to face multiple challenges, let's work together as a team to operate reliably, safely, and as efficiently as possible," Dudley said, asking pilots to use fuel-saving strategies such as taxiing with a single engine. As consumers resume traveling, most planes now have their seats full, but their tanks empty. At many of the nation's airports, there's simply not enough jet fuel around to meet the increased demand for leisure travel, which is making airlines cancel flights or make extra stops to fuel up on longer routes. The problem not only includes maritime transportation issues, but also onshore woes due to a shortage of tank truck drivers needed to deliver fuel. Approximately 20% of tankers nationwide are parked due to a lack of qualified drivers, and that's according to an industry trade group. That shortage is also having an impact on gas stations. Last year, major U.S. airlines either furloughed or laid off their employees to reduce their labor costs amid the peak of the health virus crisis. However, this year, travel demand has bounced back faster than expected, and now carriers are desperate to find, to hire, and to train workers. Airlines and airports are also scrambling to get the fuel they need because the country's pipelines shifted away from carrying jet fuel when air travel was halted last year. Since then, jet fuel isn't getting the necessary pipeline space to keep up with the recent surge in air travel. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the pipelines, and the airlines need to work together to allow space on the pipelines to ship the needed jet fuel to the airports, said a statement from Delta Airlines. Airlines are also facing considerably higher fuel costs compared to a year ago when oil prices crashed and limited demand for jet fuel sent prices down. But like many other problems across the industry, it's the imbalance between supply and demand that is lifting airfares. Supply and demand are crucial factors in airfare, and airlines can't always hike fares to cover costs. If that alternative was possible, they would not have all lost several billions of dollars over the last year and a half. According to the Consumer Price Index, the government's main inflation reading, the growing demand for leisure travel, in addition to the limited supply of seats, raised airfares by about 25% in June compared to a year earlier. As the United States economy tries to pick up steam, inflation pressures are mounting in pretty much every sector, but shortages are making it hard for businesses to rebound from the losses faced last year. In the food industry, supply chain issues are causing prices to soar at grocery stores and restaurants. Once again, the math is simple. Increased demand plus decreased supply equals higher prices. The shortages are impacting consumers and businesses alike. Many restaurants are unable to get key ingredients, and when those ingredients are finally available in the market, they come with a sizable price tag. Restaurant employee Andrea Parco, who works in the Mustard Seed in Mount Pleasant, recently exposed in an interview that because of the shortages, they're having to remove traditional meals from the menu. "We can't get crab," she says. "It's so expensive. It's hard to get our hands on. Nobody wants to think about that." Crab, scallops, and ground beef are in high demand this summer. They're the main dish in many restaurants of the country. But just as the Mustard Seed, restaurant owners are having to make changes amid the shortage. The biggest problem we're noticing is that certain food items are skyrocketing in price. We've had to limit them or eliminate them from our menu, Parco said. Shortages are hitting more than just the food supply. The sector is also facing a shortage of workers and owners who are offering higher wages for employees who are also passing along those increases to their customers. Unfortunately, inflated prices are here to stay, and what we are seeing right now is just the beginning. As supply chain woes get dramatically aggravated and imbalances between supply and demand get even more acute, the worst is yet to come, and in the coming months we will all be seeing how ravaging the inflation crisis will turn out to be.